So for those of you who weren't present last week, what I went over was middle game positions from the Olympiad. I'm going to continue to do this. I'm just going to use a few different examples. So today, one of the focuses I wanted to talk about was planning. Now, how do you think planning is important in the middle game? It's important in other phases too, but in the middle game in particular. Basically, you're kind of reacting to your opponent. You're playing, when you play move to move, in a lot of positions you should play move to move. It's a way, in a lot of positions you have to react to what your opponent's doing. You have no choice, or you have to deal with immediate threats. But let's say if you don't have any of that, okay, your opponent might not kill you or whatever. There's no killing here. But if your opponent has a clear plan and you don't, what often happens is that their moves all have a purpose. Like, they may play one move which deals with a threat, but they have a long-term goal. They have a plan. So I chose this example. This was a game between, this was actually in the final match between Russia and Canada. And for those of you who don't know, you're going, why was Canada in the final? Well, Canada was quite a few points, it was like a point and a half back of us or something like this. But we still had to beat them to win the tournament, was the deal. And this game actually went against us. So in this game, Eric Hansen was white, a Canadian GM, who you guys might know. He actually spent some time in St. Louis. And he's white against Sam Shankland, who was our board 4. And actually used to be a student of mine briefly before he turned to the dark side. So, I'm just kidding. He was actually a student of mine for a very brief period. Anyways, now he can teach me occasionally. But in any case, so so this position. By the way, black's position is totally fine here, completely fine. Oh yeah. However, this was the key. In this position, what separated the two players was that white was slightly better prepared for this game, I would say. But what was more important was that white had a clear plan and actually accomplished it all game. Now, a lot of the times you have a plan, but you have to constantly adapt. Your opponent throws something at you don't expect, or they're trying to prevent your plan. You have to adapt. You can't just stay glued to one plan. It's very rare. But it's nice to have a long-term plan, even if you're dealing with threats or doing other things, because then it makes it so that when there isn't a moment where you have to deal with an immediate threat, you know exactly what your goal is. So in this case, white had a plan and black did not, and that separated the two players, and you'll see how it actually just decided the game, the fact that white had a plan in this middle game and black did not. So first off, it's black to move. So the question is, what's going on here? What needs to be done? Right, white's king is definitely more open than it would like to be. If the king weren't open, I would say that white would have white would just be up a pawn probably. So yeah, black has the bishop, which targets f2, could possibly be good. But white definitely is a pawn to the good, and it's not exactly clear what black's compensation is. Would you say that black has long-term compensation, or does black need to prove something immediately, or would you say it's a combination of both? Both. I would agree. So now the question becomes, what do you want to accomplish? What should your main goal here be? There's one more thing in the position you need to identify. What are some questions you can ask yourself in any position? Yep.
What's the worst piece I have?
What's the worst piece I have? Absolutely. Here, I don't think black has any pieces that are too bad, so that's probably not the question here, but it's a great question. What other questions? And by the way, asking yourself questions during the game is a great thing to do. I try to get all my students, and I try to get myself to do this. It's not always easy, but... Weaknesses. Does either side have a weakness? One of the great things about black's position is that there are no weaknesses, right? How about, I don't think white can say the same, however. Yep.
How about the pawn on e5?
That would be my choice too. Now that pawn is defended well enough, but okay, right now the queen is pinned, and it's not entirely clear, how white's gonna further, defend that pawn even better. So, so if you can target that pawn, I think that that's going to be pretty good for you. It's a good question. There's queen c4 check, exactly. And then you're going to be sorry you played f6.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that a move like f6 weakens your light squares horribly. So you have to be absolutely certain there's no danger or that black doesn't have anything great they can do after f6. Otherwise, you're going to be really sorry you played that move. So what else? In the game, black played rook d7, which by itself is not a horrible move, but it also does not really... it's limited to what it improves. Because if rook de7, the knight goes back to d3, there's no huge problem. And it just didn't accomplish quite enough. So black needed to target the e-pawn in a more efficient manner. So what piece needs to be involved to target that e-pawn? Very nice. So queen e7, I think... Whoa, I love the big language here. So preparing bishop c7 was was best. Because now the problem with the bishop c7 is if the knight moves back to d3, then you can think about f6. But you have moves like c5, or you could just try to target the knight. You have queen h4. You just have all these possibilities. And it's not entirely clear how white's going to defend everything. So is the game over? Is white not have anything? I don't know. But this, because it threatens to come out to the king side in some cases, because it threatens bishop c7, you have clear ideas. I think this was the best option for black. And you'll see how quickly black's position deteriorated here. He played rook d7. So now, the key is to figure out what white does. So white has... the key for white is that you want to have a clear plan, but also achieve this plan with as little counterplay as possible. So what should white's plan here be?
The full pawn.
Excellent.
How does that?
That's the question. What white needs is to somehow solidify the d5 pawn. If white gets that pawn solid, black's just going to be suffering. And eventually white will play e6 probably, weaken the light squares. I mean, I'm not a fortune teller, but those are the types of ideas that white should look for. But the key is first you have to solidify the e5 pawn. So before you do anything, come up with a possible plan to solidify that guy. So king g2 is actually an excellent move, I think. But it has a very clear purpose to it. And the key is to figure out why king g2 is a nice move. There's a positional point and a tactical point. The positional point's easier, so let's start with that. Yeah?
It needs to get out of the pin.
Right. That's, I'd say, more the tactical point. It gets out of the pin. But also, besides getting out of the pin, it holds on to h3, it guards the squares, queen f3 looks a little nicer. It's one of those moves that I'd call it almost a housekeeping move. Which means that it makes your position a little better. It's not anything drastic, but it just makes your position a little better all around. It guards this, and I'd say that if you notice in GM games, GMs play a lot of housekeeping moves. We like our positions nice and neat. We don't like pawns hanging places. We don't like, stuff being loose. We want everything nice and guarded usually. So it's a nice habit to get into if you can't do anything better, to find a housekeeping move. Obviously, you look at tempo moves and, moves that are more aggressive first, but if they don't work out, a housekeeping move can be nice. But it's also important that the f-pawn gets out of the pin. For example, we'll come back to this moment. So king g2 is played, and now black played king h8. So, yeah, black maybe should try rook de7, but white can simply play back. And if c5, c4, and this knight's pretty solid, and notice how there's nothing on the d file now. So there's not so easy to target this knight. So white can play like queen e4, rook e3, rook de1, and okay, white's improving. Not to mention this bishop seems kind of embarrassed. I don't know. Okay, so in the game, black played king h8 to kind of get out of light square stuff. Again, not so sure it's the best move. But black's kind of playing move to move, just dealing with problems as they come. Which is not always bad, but I'd say in this case, he really ended up just kind of without a plan, and white really had a plan. So this is actually one of the really cool moves of the game. It's not the first move that would come to mind, at least not for me. but it's a really, really nice move, which, kind of goes with white's plan of solidifying e5. So in order to come by this move, let's take it step by step. First, you have to figure out what is the ideal setup to defend this e-pawn. What would be the dream? Yes?
Have pawn f4 defending it.
I would say that's a possible dream, but it wouldn't be my dream. And the reason why is because with the pawn on f4, your king is more open. And I would also say that you're maybe more vulnerable to f6 type moves in some situations. Your knight has to find a square. I would not say that's the dream. That's kind of like, okay, maybe, if you have to do it, it's not bad, but it wouldn't be my first choice. Yeah?
What if you just trade it off?
The e-pawn? For the f-pawn. That would be okay. But I don't think it's quite possible yet. After e6, queen takes knight is always a worry. You have to worry about doubling rooks and trying to take that pawn. I'd say that e6, you're not ready for it yet. But what would be the dream? It's just for defending that pawn. Right now you have queen on e2, rook on e1. What would you much prefer?
Knight on d3, but closed.
But you don't want your knight on d3, right?
Yeah, because the d file is open.
Yeah. And also it's just, it would be nicer if you could do it without the knight there. The knight on d3 is a more passive knight. You put it there if you have to, but if you're not forced to do it, you'd rather not. So what else is ideal? Right now there's a queen on e2, rook on e1. What's the problem with this setup? Which piece of yours is out of, it doesn't look right?
A4, going with the, oh no, that's
It's okay? What piece is out of play in the queen e2, rook e1 setup? Which of these pieces is not quite right?
fine.
Well, the rook on a1 is definitely not participating, which we'll get to.
The king.
Do you want to
We just put it on g2.
Do you want to switch the rook with the queen and the rook?
The queen on e1 will be okay, but mostly I'd rather have the rooks doubled. If you could get queen f3, rook e2, rook e1, that to me is ideal, because then you're ready to play e6, it probably can't be stopped, and your rooks are going to be on the open file, your queen gets to a better square, you're not pinned. To me, that's the dream. And sometimes you can't live your dream. It's just one of those things. But in this case, white got to live the dream. The question is, how did he achieve it? Because if queen f3 here, there's a concrete problem. Rook takes e5, right? So, how did he get this dream? What was the move you wanted to play? Queen e4, right? But you can't play it because of rook d2. Fix that problem. If rook d1, I trade and take. So, we're running out of options. So you guys are trying to be efficient with your time and really do it quickly. Normally, that's a great thing. You don't want to give your opponent tons of time. The problem here for black is that black has almost nothing to do. Black has no threats and no way to repair the position. Which means, well, what's your idea with a4? Okay, so if I put my pawn on a6 and not let you trap my bishop? Okay. He did something similar. And I'm using the word similar kind of generously. Yeah? Queen c2, I can still take on e5, right? Queen takes? I can take that rook. That was a nice try, though. I like your spirit of back rank trickery, but yeah.
Like if you just slow like rook to c1 to c2.
It's an excellent idea. It says so right now.
Yeah, I wanted to play a4 and b, and then like try to get my rook up.
You do realize this is faster, right?
Yeah, I know.
Okay. So rook c1 to c2. Now, here's what I wanted to point out to you. Why, oh why, did he not play this move immediately? And this is where housekeeping moves come in handy, because it looks like this should be totally possible now, right? Believe it or not, black has an idea now. And it uses the fact that the king is on g1. Well, if f6 immediately, I have queen c4 check again.
Yeah, there's still queen c.
But you have the right idea. Mm-hmm. So now I'm forced to play knight d3, and now there are two problems. First of all, this pawn, if this pawn moves, there's an unpleasant surprise waiting. Queen g3 check. And if f4, then bishop takes king is an even more unpleasant surprise. Yeah. So now all of a sudden, okay, it's not like white has no chances here or anything like that. I mean, probably queen e4, black takes, but at least now black's won the pawn back. So black has some chances. Not to mention that f2 can still be weak. Like, I think that the knight looks better than the bishop, but maybe black can do okay there. Which is why he played king g2 first. So you see how a move like king g2 looks like a simple improving move. That's how it looked to my eyes at first. But it actually had a very concrete purpose. And believe me, he knew that this was his plan. So king h8, rook c1. So black plays a6. We can safely assume this move does not contain a threat. So what's our plan? Right. And these are the types of moves which you want to be careful to make sure a6 doesn't contain some hidden thing. Like, oh, bishop a7, queen b6 with mate. But obviously not. But when your opponent doesn't really plays a move like a6, it means that you can play a quicker move. Rook c1, you probably want to spend some time. But once you do that, the nice thing about having a plan is you can actually play quicker. So I'm sure he played rook c2 pretty quickly. So black played queen d8. Black decided, okay, I have to do something about this plan, because otherwise it's going to kill me. So queen c4 looks like an okay move.
I'm still trying to stop you from playing rook e2. I'm not sure if I never mind.
What is it? It's a bell outside on a bicycle.
It means you have the wrong answer. No. Queen c4.
Yeah, I
Queen c4 looks reasonable to me. I don't see anything wrong with it. He obviously didn't play that. But let's see. So rook d2 seems logical, although I think it might just lose after takes and... Oh no, there's an f2 hanging still.
yeah, exactly.
But okay, let's check it out. So takes, queen takes. But you can probably just play here, right? Queen has to move back. And then e6. Nah, this looks great for you. Right? e6 comes. So maybe there's something else, but I'm not really sure. Because rook e7, e6 looks really nasty. That looks not a lot of fun. I don't know. To me, this looks like a fine choice. He played queen f3, which is similar, I would say, right? But his idea is he wants to double rooks and get the ideal position, right? So black plays bishop c7. He finally figured out he had to put his bishop here, but it was about, I don't know, 10 moves too late. I'm approximating. It's probably fewer than that. But so what does white play? Now, I would calculate e6 before blitzing out rook e2. But in this case, you are correct. I'm sure you looked at it all. So in this case, though, yeah. If you tried e6, I believe takes on f4 would be kind of annoying. Because now... Stop whistling at me. Because now if takes the rook, then this rook hangs. Takes. You're even material all of a sudden. And if you take back, then I take back on e6. So not the ideal. So rook e2. And now black has some problems. You've achieved your dream. Doesn't happen too often. I know, it's amazing. I'm sure he felt great about himself. E6 is ready. You have all your pieces lined up. And black's position kind of just falls apart. But he's still very precise. He plays rook d2. So what now? Queen d8 was probably the best move, but life is still rough. Life is still not great, but this would be a better move. He played queen d7 with the idea to kind of discourage e6. So what does white play? Well, let's go back to basics. Any given position, what are the first moves you look at? There's a name for those types of moves. Tempo moves, forcing moves, exactly. So what gets calculated first? Thank you. So what happens after e6? Black pretty much has to capture it, right? I mean, okay, black doesn't have to, but if black doesn't capture it, it's definitely your move, probably, right? Because then you can trade off your only potential weakness, you weaken the light squares, it just achieves everything. So after pawn takes pawn, what are white's options? Knight g6 check is definitely an option. Knight takes e6 is definitely an option. Anything appealing to anyone? Very good. So this is where I think some people go wrong. They give up on variations too quickly. So for example, if you calculate e6, f takes e6, and you go, well, knight g6, king g8 doesn't lead anywhere, knight takes e6 is not possible, and you kind of give up, it makes it so that you don't consider it, and then you have to play an inferior move. But e6 was clearly the move here. And the reason why is because you have this tactic with knight takes e6. So it's important you make sure that no matter how good you think your position is, or how bad, whatever, that you try to not give up too early. Because if you miss knight takes e6, you're probably not going to play e6, right? And the idea, of course, is that if rook takes e6, what happens? Queen f8 check, king h7, queen f5 check, and you pick up the rook. So, instead, black played this move. So, does this move threaten rook takes e6? Because it covers that f8 square. So let's not allow that. Possible, but the knight on e6 is a pretty nice piece, wouldn't you say? Queen f5 looks nicer to me. Whenever you have a piece that's this good, you shouldn't want to move it back, right? You want to keep it if you can. So queen f5 I think is a nice move. Not to mention that black has to be very careful now, because for example, a move like knight g5 might be a threat. Or even knight takes g7, some move like this. Because keep in mind that the queens are attacked, the rooks are attacked, so there's going to be tactics galore in a position like this. So black played rook e7 to guard everything. So now what? This was, I think, white's maybe only mistake of the whole game. And it's not even that big of a mistake. It's an okay move, but probably not his best. I would say that you have lots of good moves in a position like this. It's not like a position where you have just one good move. But okay, I think the first thing you want to look at is, what are the most forcing moves, right? Queen f8, king h7, you don't quite have enough, right? Your queen's kind of in the way. You'd like to play knight f8 check, but your queen's there. If queen f5 check, the king goes back. Doesn't quite work out. I don't know. When I see a position like this, I want to see if I have attacking moves. Queen g6, you said? But okay, queen g6, I mean, I can stop that threat, right? Yeah, I don't know. I would look at trying to just open up the king, right? Whenever I see a vulnerable king like this, I want to try to open it up. So, okay, after pawn takes, you need to make sure you have something here. But I don't know, this doesn't seem to work out so well. King G6, I couldn't find. Oops. I couldn't find anything here. It seems like you've actually done more harm than good. But okay, I mean, even a move like Queen G6 looks very tempting. You have to make sure you really are careful, because you play a move like this at the wrong moment, it could be really bad. Actually, yeah. There are other options too. For example, Queen F8 check. Yeah, I remember now. Here, and then a move like Rook E4 could be nasty. Because if Rook takes E6, you have Queen F5 check, and now your Rook's ready to slide over. So like Knight takes G5 and Rook G4 could be just nasty. So I think that Black's king is under heavy fire now. But okay, I mean, it's not easy to play a move like this. He did something very understandable, which is he just played F4. He wants to solidify that knight on E6, right? So Black played queen back. So what now? I would say he found a nice housekeeping move here. What's a housekeeping move? Yep.
How about King F3?
Very nice. Defend the rook, right? Defend your F4 pawn. Just improve your position. Moves like this are central to good technique. I would say, make sure you keep your whole position together. You make sure that there are no, and then you check for tactics, because usually good technique involves lots of tactics, often little tactics that help you get your way a little bit, and you'll see what I mean later. Black played King G8. Maybe not best, but again, there just aren't that many moves. So, how can White improve the position now? Ask yourself which piece is not quite right. There's a piece of White's which can definitely be improved. Between the 4 pieces White has, which piece is out of place? The queen is not only not doing something. What move does White want to play to really solidify his position?
You want the pawn at F5?
Right. Once the pawn gets to F5, Black's probably just going to be so depressed he'll just resign. The pawn at F5 is really strong, right? So the key is, how do you put a pawn on F5? Yep.
How about Queen D3?
Very nice. So this is, again, where Queen E4 would be an okay move, but I think this one's even better, because it makes a threat on the bishop, and you're using tactics to your advantage. This is, again, part of good technique is using tactics to help you. Usually, if you have a great pieces and a great position, upper pawn or not, often tactics will just work for you, because your position's better than your opponent's. Their king is worse, their pieces are worse, so tactics are usually going to favor you. Use them to your advantage. So Queen D3, I think, is an excellent move. What happens if Rook takes E6? Queen C4 with a pin, and if King here, then we finally get to play our move, and Black probably resigns. So Black played bishop back to B8. White plays which move? Ba-bam. So, I mean, imagine this though. At the beginning, White started with an extra pawn which wasn't even that good. Look at White's extra pawn now. It's that pawn on F5. That I would call a very, very good extra pawn. So, Black played Rook D7. Again, probably several good moves. He chose a centralizing move, which I'm always for. Even more central. Right. Almost always, like, the center is just a great place for a queen. If you're ever not sure, put your queen in the center. I'm just telling you. Queen C4 looked fine, but then maybe Queen F7 and there's a pin and who knows. Queen E4 is just central, ready to do stuff. So Black played here and then resigned after one more move. Very nice. So, why Knight C5? If Queen takes, then Queen E8 check and takes Rook. And note how the Queen not only wins the Rook, but it covers all the checks. This Queen cannot give a single check. Actually, by the way, guys, I got very sloppy here. In this position, White is not going to take this Rook. And now, be precise, guys.
Queen E6. Rook takes and then queen C8.
Yes. Now black will resign. Sorry. Yeah, he had no intention of taking that. And otherwise you have to basically trade queens,
Takes, and he has to move.
and then you take with the rook, and now there's a rook e8 check and rook hanging, which means you have to play here probably, right?
Yeah, but there's a G7.
And okay, 2 pawns down with the worst position. Against the GM, you can safely resign. So that was that. But you could see how white just slowly improved his position, and then towards the end, you saw how he still had a plan. He wanted to put his pawn on f5, and he also, he had, he used little tactics to help him out to win the game. All right. Whoa. Didn't mean for that to happen. All right. So, I was going to show. All right, hold on a sec. Yeah. So this game was crazy. We could go over all of it. Yeah, but I believe this was the moment. It's okay. You still have to figure out why. So, this position is white to move. So here, this has been just a crazy, crazy game. There's no other way really to describe it. It's just been nuts. And this is not a position where clear plan really makes that much sense or whatever's going on. But you still want to have an idea of how your pieces coordinate and what the ideas are. I would say that in this particular position, white has a good position. But black had a better idea of where she wanted her pieces and what her ideas were. And because of that, black was able to win this game. So, what would you play as white? And why? Well, the problem is white played bishop d2, which is just not active enough. The key is you want to take on f4, right?
Yeah.
What's the problem if you do it right away?
93.
Excuse you.
Or you can take the bishop.
You might want to
Never mind.
you might want to think about this.
Take. Okay, rook takes bishop. Rook takes bishop. I know.
See, I made it so complicated that even if you see the answers, you're not going to get it. So first, let's check out knight d3. What does white play now? And this is where you have to make sure you look at all your opponent's possibilities. If you slack on that, if you're like, some move like this is where you're going to come up short. White has an excellent move here. Process of elimination. If you just move the queen and lose your bishop, you're dead. If you don't move the queen and give up your queen, you're probably also dead. We can safely assume. Therefore, tempo moves always, right? Imagine if you miss that move. Have to take with king, right? Because if you allow queen takes b5 check, you're just going to get slaughtered. Takes. Check. 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 Whoa-oh. And let's just say you have some problems. So, what do you do instead? Correct. And now? Shall we? Yeah, this never works out. Just don't do it. So king back. And now, what's the point?
So it's like if your queen on c6, like if you play rook e6, now you can actually take on f4, and if your queen's on c6, you can take on c6 with the check and d6.
Very nice. Back rank mate. This is not a check. So, you have to calculate carefully and see details in the position. It's the only way you're going to find this stuff, looking for details. So, that is why you play rook a5 first and then take. And now your problems are a lot smaller, let's just say. However, in the game, black-white played here, which was too slow. Black played knight d3. I'll even let you guys. Queen here. So now what? So what's white's problem now after knight d3, queen a5? Right. And the fact that her queen's out of the game is a big problem. Yeah, this was, by the way, just to, I was going to fill you in, but I ended up getting too absorbed with making sure you didn't say rook a5. This was a game, it was in the last round between India and the US in the women's Olympiad. And this is actually our US champion, Nazi Paikidze, as black. She actually didn't have a great tournament there overall, I would say. Like, she performed below where she certainly can. But this last round win could have actually won the match for us and maybe would have had a shot at some medal. Unfortunately, our board 3 ended up losing. But this was a really crucial game, and I'm sure both sides were really quite nervous, but yeah. Well, you can give a check first. Right. So notice how white's, I mean, it looks very tactical and concrete, and it is. You have to be calculating like crazy a position like this. However, notice how black's play has a clear purpose, right? Put the knight on d3, queen on c5, secure the queen on a5, and then try to play for direct kingside threats. It doesn't seem like much of a plan, but it is, because, you know, you're really just trying to open up your opponent. So g3 was played. So knight f2, you're going to have problems, right? Because you lose b5 with check and probably, yeah, most likely, not to get too violent, but probably it's not going to be good for you. Let's put it this way. But look at all black's pieces. They're perfect, which means you probably can improve them, right? What can you improve? What do you need to do to make threats here? If you're in doubt, pick the one that doesn't lose. Yeah. So yeah, black tries to go and break up the king, right? Because if black gets in h4 and takes here, it's just going to be over, right? It's slow, but it's also, I mean, white has to do something pretty fast, right? Because otherwise there are going to be some real problems. And in this position, white has only one way to stay in the game. And actually, maybe even be better. But it requires seeing a couple really difficult moves. And this is where white fell apart. I mean, it's a difficult position, but the key is you have to figure out exactly, you know, exactly how to get in the game. So what was the problem you said that white has here? You pointed it out. What's white's problem here? Other than the fact that the h-pawn's coming down and the queen on a5. So queen to a3 is actually not this move. Queen to a3 is actually an incredible move. So the idea is that after knight f2 check, rook takes, queen takes, White has another incredible move. Not that incredible. The problem with bishop e6, king takes, is that I'm threatening mate in 1 on g2, so you have to mate all with check. And you cannot do it, because I can run to f5 then. Even if I defend e6 there, I'm not convinced you have a threat. Excellent move. So the idea is that now you're threatening this. If it takes, then this rook hangs. And notice how it's all with tempo, right? Queen e7 check's actually very annoying. So black has to stop it. And now white plays rook f1. And then further craziness. Tempo moves. Notice how that's why you put the bishop on g5. And black actually has some problems. Because if takes, then queen takes check. Takes this guy with check, everything falls apart for black. So again, I mean, it's very complicated. It takes a while. We'd have to spend like another hour going over this to cover every line. But it's more about like making sure you spot these resources, right? Because, I mean, my guess would be neither side had a lot of time, so finding ideas like this is really difficult. But you can still think in terms of, okay, I need to fix my queen. My queen's horrible. So queen a3. Look at the forcing line with knight f2 check. Takes, takes. Bishop g5, again, a tempo move, looking at the e7 square, trying to create counterplay. So a process of elimination can really come in handy. And the problem is that white just probably didn't have much time. But, yeah, rook e1, and now it was pretty simple. Takes, takes. So finish white off here. Calculate. Is takes on e6 really a problem? If bishop takes, then king d6. If bishop here, you can always take. If rook moves, the bishop hangs. So always calculate. You don't want to have to play rook g6, right? So you look at f2 first. Rook moves. Now. Very nice. Break up those pawns. King g2. From here on, she plays perfectly, I would say. Take. So now the king's open. The question is how to finish it. What piece do you need to get in the game to give checkmate? The queen. So? Very nice. White takes. And now, this was a nice finishing touch. Again, look for which piece needs improvement. The queen, perfect. Rook on f8, perfect. And now, rook takes h3, rook h8 check, queen f5 is hard to stop. But you see how quickly that happened, right? It went from, it looked like white was doing fine to white was doing okay to white was lost. I'm sure there was time pressure. I mean, probably to play a position like this in time trouble, almost no one can ever do, right? But the key that, why did black have more success playing this position as white than white? Right. She coordinated her pieces, right? White, I mean, like bishop d2 clearly at least said to me that like white didn't have a sense of urgency as far as how to improve the pieces. Like she needed to force the rook to b8, take on f4. Again, it's not so easy to see all this stuff. But the point was that white didn't really have a plan as far as how to improve everything that I could see. Whereas black had a clear plan. I want queen on c5, blocking the queen out, knight on d3, pawn pushing to h4. h5 may not have even been the best move because it allowed this crazy queen a3, bishop g5 stuff. But again, finding that in time pressure was really hard. But what gave black the advantage was she had a plan. She wanted h5, h4. She wanted to open up the king. She wanted to, and then later she had the plan of improving the queen. And notice how her plan, because she had a plan and white didn't, even though her position wasn't objectively that great, she was able to win the game by she had an idea of what she was doing and her opponent was kind of reacting and not really knowing what to do. So this is not a very typical example of a clean plan. Like the first game was a perfect example of, okay, this is the plan, this is how it goes, you use some tactics, you play some stuff, but basically your plan works out. In this game, it was just a mess. But Black still had an idea of where she wanted her pieces and what her plan was, and it helped her win the game. And ultimately, of course, it was a crucial game in the match. So, yeah. So, and what's one of the things I've noticed about Nazi, which she tends to do pretty well, which is that she definitely is a planner. Like, she's someone who likes to know exactly where her pieces are going, what her ideas are, and she's good at formulating something during the game. I'd say a lot of players don't do that as well. And there are some people who like to play nonsensical positions and crazy stuff, and she's not bad at that, but she definitely likes to have an idea of where all her pieces are going. And when she does, you can really tell because all her moves are kind of harmonious.